I'm Elizabeth Vincentelli, and I write for the New York Times.
And I'm Peter Marks, newly liberated from my long-term assignment as theater critic for the Washington Post.
Yes.
And yes, we are back with another edition of Marks and Vincentelli, the theater podcast anchored by Marks and Vincentelli. Because theater lovers, we are going on. The show must go on.
I think this is like a big reason. Like, it's been a while since our last podcast, but we're back. We're going to stay back. And clearly the reason behind our, kind of dithering a little bit, because you had a lot going on.
That's right. Blame it on me, Elizabeth. It's my fault. You were
totally
ready every day to record, and I was off. But it's true. We kid. Yes, it was a very busy period. And we have this really great interview in the vault that we're pulling out today. And Elizabeth will tell you a little bit more about it.
It's a fresh vault. I don't want to say
it's not like
it's a fresh vault.
Yes,
it's not like it's been sitting in the cheese vault, maturing.
Yeah,
like a delicious quintet, reaching peak sharpness.
Can you say quintet again, please?
Quintet.
Oh, I love that.
I had, when I was visiting my family in France just recently, we had a raclette party, and let me tell you, I ate more cheese in one evening than sitting through Titanic.
Wow.
It was.
That's funny. That's a good line.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I just came up with it. It's not even in the script.
Well, just check
I went rogue.
Check with your cardiologist now. Le cardiologiste.
Listen, it's amazing. I had to kind of roll myself down to the car. I could barely walk. But anyway, so back in a few months ago, not that long ago, we talked to David Adjmi, whose show Stereophonic was, I think we can say that, but it was like one of the hits of the fall.
Totally.
It was. The musical hit of the fall was Merrily We Roll Along, and the play hit of the fall was Stereophonic. No doubt. And in fact, there are now rumors that it's going to transfer to Broadway.
Yeah, more than rumors.
Possibly this season. Oh, I hear you're still connected to the pulse of Broadway.
Yeah, it's hard to pry me away from that.
Which I think it's safe to say that we both love the show.
Mm-hmm.
And in your review, you actually said it was the best play of the year. Not just the year's best, but one of the best works of narrative art about the day-to-day grind and emotional toll of artistic creation. So we're going to recap a little bit what Stereophonic is about, and then we'll just bring on our chat with David.
Yeah. So for many of you, I hope, have seen the play, but for those who haven't, Stereophonic takes place over the course of a year, the year being 1976 and 77, some time ago, and set in a recording studio in California, 2 recording studios, in fact, where a band is working on the follow-up to their number 1 hit album. The album, the band is never named. It's made up of 3 Brits and 2 Americans, and among them are 2 couples, 2 romantically linked couples. Some people have already sussed out that this is the story in broad outline of Fleetwood Mac, which had a similar constitution. And over the course of a 3-hour play, a riveting 3-hour play, we watch them do lots of things, include consume large amounts of cocaine. They discuss the philosophy of art and music, and of course work on their album and some terrific songs.
Yeah, and the songs are, it's not a musical, it's a play with music, but there are great original songs by Will Butler, who used to be in Arcade Fire. And just a quick look back at David Adjmi's career, his professional debut in New York was stunning in 2009. And that play, which I loved at the time, starred a young, her star was just starting to rise, Christian Milioti. And I've loved all of David's shows since. Elective Affinities, 3C, Marie Antoinette. And I also loved his book. He wrote a memoir called Lot 6, which came out in 2020, and which was brutal, brutal. Especially the sections about his stay at Juilliard is really he really goes to town.
Wow.
And now we're gonna bring in David, and we'll chat again after that. David, the last time, I mean, you have not had a show in New York in 10 years since Marie Antoinette. Like, what happened?
Well, I mean, the first thing was I was writing a memoir, which I don't know why I accepted that charge. But HarperCollins approached me, and I thought, well, I should do this. I'm not going to get a chance to write a memoir again, so I'll take it. But that turned out to be a very drawn out process. So that took about 9 years, and I was writing this play concurrently with that. I had another play about Oscar Levant that did not happen,
Right.
and then COVID happened. So it was the confluence of all those things.
Mm-hmm. And you, because I think I talked to you about your memoir, and you had mentioned that you were thinking about doing a trilogy of music plays. And I think the Oscar Levant play was one of them, and Stereophonic was another one. And what was the third one?
The third one I'm about to start working on in earnest now. It's a play about Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys. And I'm doing it with Lila Neugebauer, the director. So Lila's going to direct it, and we're going to we're co-creating it. So we're sort of coming up with the conception together, and then I'll actually write it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's sort of about Brian Wilson abandoning the Smile album, and that's kind of the premise of it, and what happens as a result of it, because his life becomes kind of derailed once he does that.
Why is there this interest in music-themed plays for you right now? Like, I don't think that was really all that much the case in your earlier work, but suddenly you seem to be hitting a period of your life where that is very present, obviously.
It's a really good question. I don't know. I'm not a big music person, actually. I love music, but I don't have a fetishistic love of music. And I'm not an audiophile the way some other people are, but I sort of walk backwards into this stuff somehow. It's sort of by accident. The Oscar Levant thing was something that it just kind of came up in discussion, and the fact that he was a composer wasn't really the main interest there. And then the Brian Wilson thing, that was something that Lila brought to me. And Stereophonic was, they were just these weird, I can't explain it. I can't explain these kind of weird fulgurations of insight where okay, that's going to be a play. But I do love music, and I do feel sometimes that my work is music. I think playwriting, the logic of it is a kind of musical symphonic logic sometimes when I'm working. So it's not totally outside my ken. Even though,
and also, I would say that in Stereophonic, I felt, the connections to backstage at a play, and just the creative process, that same collaborative aspect that happens, feels like that sort of drove the tension at some level in Stereophonic, the way you would in, Act One by, Moss Hart or something. There's a similarity in terms of what transpires and how heightened the feelings are in that kind of room.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think I had to conceal that from myself when I was writing it, because I didn't want to know that I was writing about me. You know what I mean? You don't want to know, but then your unconscious will at some point reveal itself to you in the writing. So yeah, I was, I think, having a crisis about collaboration that I hadn't fully worked out. And it was very much, I think the play is a coded, it's not, but it also is a coded sort of working out of my own problems in the theater.
No, really? You have problems in the theater? How could that be?
Dysfunction is dysfunction. I mean, it's just, it's whether it's theater or bands or whatever, it's all kind of the same thing.
Uh-huh.
I felt it was a disservice, when I was writing my review, and I know you don't read reviews. I adored this play. I haven't stopped thinking about it since I saw it. And I thought it would be a disservice to even, some people were saying, it's Fleetwood Mac, it's blah, blah, blah. And I felt like, that denigrates the achievement. It's not it's not an entertainment behind the scenes piece. It's a much deeper exploration of human beings in this extreme moment of their lives. This moment of incredible success, and yet but in the way that they're each so isolated, even together. I felt that was so much deeper than trying to make it into a gossip, to think it's somehow gossipy about, the lives of rock stars, which it does not feel like at all.
Mm-hmm.
I thank you for saying that. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I definitely borrow always from pop culture and Shakespeare had Hollinside Chronicles,
Right.
We have our myths and our gods and our heroes, but I do think that it's ultimately, I feel like I've written a very personal play. It really is. I had to dig in to very personal stuff inside myself to write it, and so yeah, I don't think I've written a bio play. I find it confusing when people say that, but I think that that's like an easy, reductive way to talk about it. But thank you for saying that.
You've said that. Okay, so you've said that the initial inspiration for Stereophonic. So you were on a flight and you were listening to a Led Zeppelin song and you started thinking like, what was it like to be in the studio when Robert Plant was recording that vocal? And that kind of like sent you off into this. How did this happen? And I love the kind of documentary aspect of it, which, again, we've said it's not about anything specific, but it's also very much drenched in real stuff that happened or practices during the 70s, and there's a realness to it that I completely love, but it's also very analog, the whole thing. Why that? It also feels like a nod to like a gone era, the era of bands being in the studio and doing the song, playing it together instead of like patching it together on a computer. Like what attracted you particularly to that? And the Brian Wilson would be the same case. I mean, the same organic.
I mean, consciously, I couldn't have told you at the time, but I know I don't like writing about. I write very few things set in the present, and I think I don't always like the present for various reasons. I think like it's boring a little bit. Like, yes, they could have patched it together and done it so easily. So much of the drama in this play comes out of the technological problems and the difficulties of technology. Because it was more rudimentary, and you could destroy a song if you kept playing the tape over and over, and then suddenly you lose the levels or whatever. There's all kinds of problems that come from the analog technology. So I think it's just dramatically more interesting. The same way it's like in the 70s, all those movies where like people are trying to make a phone call on a payphone and they can't get in. And, it's like, we don't have these problems anymore. We're like, oh my God, where's the map? I can't find it. There is something like, it just lends to better drama. But I also think there's something about the 70s. I'm just kind of trapped there, and I'm sure it's some sort of weird, like lizard brain thing that I just can't get out of there. But I also think there's something very interesting about this play is so much about collaboration and being together. Like one of the questions of the play is like, can we coexist together? And can we make something more than the sum of its parts with all of this strife and ego and whatever? And the 80s are so much about this kind of weird siphoning into ego and individualism and capitalism and corporate stuff. And I just felt like this play is kind of like takes place during the last gasp when we were really, there was a kind of innocence to how people work together, even in like, pop bands.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that they were able to function together. So I don't know. I think that has something to do with it.
I'm really curious, David, about it's always mysterious to me how you go from blank page to a world, and how did you know when the balance of characters was right? When it was, the end result in this case is, is kind of bigger than all the characters put together. But how did you know what world had, how much it needed to be populated? Is that a trial and error thing? Were there characters you add and subtract? Was this always the template for this piece with, Grover and Charlie at the control, at the console, and 5 musicians, in the booth? How did that evolve for you? Where, does it change over time as you're working with these people?
It really changes. I mean, I didn't know. For the first workshop I did, I asked Daniel, first of all, Daniel Auken, the director, to be involved before I had a word on the page, and Will Butler too, and David Zinn too, the set designer, and Justin Craig, the music director. They were all involved. They just said, "We'll do it," but I didn't totally know what I was doing. And I had like a few scenes, and I said to Daniel, let's do it like a little workshop and put these scenes up. But there were no engineers, because I didn't think about engineers, because I was a total dum-dum. So I just had these characters doing their, recording and playing and jamming. And I was like, something's not right here. I feel like there's an engineer or producer. So I added the engineer. Then I went to John Kilgore, who was Philips Glass's engineer in the 70s, and he's amazing and brilliant, but he knows analog stuff. And I had like more of a draft. And then he said, I think Grover needs an assistant. He can't just be sitting there by himself. And I thought, that's when it occurred to me, oh my God, they're the chorus, they're us. And then that can be another track. And that was a very revelatory moment when I realized I could have these the doubling in that way. Grover and Charlie in the band. But in terms of the composition, there were certain things that I absolutely knew from the very beginning. Like I knew I wanted to show songs developing, and I knew I wanted to show fragments of songs, and I wanted it to feel voyeuristic. I wanted it to feel like a documentary, and you see what you see, and we're not performing for you. I've worked very, very hard to like craft this feeling, this fly in the wall thing for the audience, so that you feel like you're looking through almost like a lattice or something to get to the characters. And people have said to me, oh, I feel like I shouldn't have been watching that. That was inappropriate. Like I shouldn't have been there, which to me is a huge compliment, because I like to craft it that way. I want people to feel that way, that they're sort of trying to like look in.
Right.
But then in terms of the composition, I mean, if I'm totally honest with you, I really think television influenced the structure of the play, because as I was working on it, I thought, I can foreground and background characters in the way that like Mad Men does, or in the way that The Soprano does, so that, this episode can foreground this character, but then their background here. I really like that when shows do it. And so I started thinking about, Peter and Diana could be the people who go through the entire thing, but then other people get their moments depending on what act we're in. And but it was a very slow evolution, and there were little epiphanies along the way. It wasn't just sort of like, here's the big structure and here's how the character here. And a lot of times for me, story comes last. Like I have these characters doing absolutely nothing. And then I start torquing it with story. Okay, what's the event of the scene? Okay, it'll be this. And then, if that's the event, then I could have that happen in the next scene. So it crystallizes for me in like a very strange, slow way. And I wanted to take my time with it.
How much did Will Butler, how much was his inspired by the script? I mean, your words, or was it, were these two independent threads for a play? Did he, because for me, it felt so organic to who these characters were, what they sing. I mean, and that's so unique. So often plays feel like they've inserted songs that feel very artificial and, ersatz kind of, meant to be a pastiche of the period. But these feel like real living pieces of art on their own. And I wondered if it was like, does he go off and do that by himself, or are you giving him ideas for songs? I mean, how does that happen?
Well, I agree that I think Will is very special, and I loved working with him. He was just tremendous. So what we did was, he would come to work. I asked him in 2014, please do this with me. He said, okay. And then he'd be like going on tour with Arcade Fire for 2 years. And then he got a degree in public policy at Harvard.
What? I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. Cause he's a complete freak. He's a polymath and he just like can't stop. And he'd go be like, enrolling voters everywhere and trying to like save democracy. And then he'd come back. So, eventually, and I had all these workshops and he'd come and see, okay, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. He'd like, shrug. There was nothing for him to do really until I really had the structure set. And then at some point I said, okay, song A, song B, song D, song E. First we'll see this here, then we'll see it repeat here in a new iteration. Then we'll hear this. So, I sort of mapped out, these are the songs I think we need. There's only going to be a few, and I want to see them repeat, and I want to see them repeat in different ways. Here's the feeling tone of these songs. Here's who I think wrote these songs. Here's the script. Go off. So he went off and read the script, thought about it, and sort of felt his way through it character by character and did his, like, as he calls it, his Stanislavski work. Will is a complete theater geek and he loves the idea that he gets to do Stanislavski work.
Oh my God.
This is the thing that's so cute about him is like, he actually is a theater geek. Like he did it in high school and he loved it. And now he's like, oh, I'm doing it again. So, so that's it. And then he'd come back and some of the early iterations of some of the songs were kind of blunt. And I was like, no, that's not really Diane. That's not how it feels to me. That's too angry. I don't think she's angry. I think it's this. With Peter, I was like, I want it wilder. Like, I think he's nuttier. I think he's more, like I want his energy to be this way. So we would talk a lot about it and he would come back and he, to his credit, was like, okay. Not like, no, you're going to do what I wrote. He would be like, okay, great. What about this? What about that? So he was incredibly collaborative in a way that was very surprising. I really wasn't expecting it. And I thought, I'm going to nudge him as much as I can and see what if he breaks. And he didn't break. He was incredibly resilient and really creative.
Were you the Peter?
I am Peter, but like I feel like we all have to play this game. Like, who are you? And everyone says I'm Peter, but I'm like a Peter Grover Diana hybrid. I would say I'm really have a lot of contradiction because I'm not. Peter could be very tone deaf. I'm actually quite. I am a perfectionist, and I will push, but I also know when to stop, and also like I give positive reinforcement. Peter does not. Peter is just going to drill down until he gets oil.
There was there's a scene, the scene when he tells Diana's come up with a new song, and there's a scene when he makes her play the piano, knowing that she doesn't play the piano all that well, but he thinks having someone who doesn't play the piano, who's not technically good on the piano, will bring something different to the song. And when he makes her do that, and at first she's very reluctant because she doesn't want to be humiliated or embarrassed by her lack of chops, let's say. And when I saw the show, I was sitting next to two women in their early 20s, and they gasped in horror when he said that. They leaned forward and they were so horrified. They had already been just like completely like taken aback by the huge amount of coke that they take. Like I could tell, like they were like, "What?"
The bag
of coke was really
Where's
like
bag?
Like that scene. And I remember thinking, well, I think if you're in your early 20s, I think there's been such a sea change in the way people perceive what we're meant to accept or not. And I think for them, it was more important that Diana be more comfortable. Whereas the thing is, she's not comfortable, but the song is better.
Right.
So how do you deal with that? Because I think for a lot of people who are younger now, it's a very tough choice. Like, I think they would say, no, I think it's more important that Diana be comfortable. You know what I mean? Don't make her do something that she's not comfortable with. Well, she's pushed into an area that she's not comfortable in, but the artistic result is better. So
Right.
that to me
But
is
see,
one of
yeah.
the key moments of the play. Like in your head, you have to work around that. You know what I mean?
I think that that's absolutely right. I think millennials, it's really funny to watch millennials try to digest this play. I worked with a lot of millennials as assistants when I was writing this, and I dictated a lot of the play. So a lot of it wasn't written. It was me dictating to my assistants who would type it out and then read it back to me. And I would say, okay, move it, change it, add interruptions here, there, and stuff. But a lot of times my assistants would say, I would say, can Peter get away with this? And they would say, no, that I can't go with that. If he says that, I can't go with this character evermore. I wanted to see how far I could push it so that for them, they would be able to still accept and care about this character.
Yeah, but
'cause
the
I could have gone
70s were completely different. Like the base level in the 70s is very different.
That's the thing, but it has to be holographic though, because this is not the 70s. So people need to see, you know, how could it feel the way it felt in the 70s now without people going crazy. I mean, people gasp every night. Every night, whatever he says. I mean, there's like 3 or 4 moments where he says something to her and they're like, it's like it's like a grand guignol.
Right.
It's crazy. And I don't know when you saw it, if that happened, but it happens really every single night. And that's very bizarre. I've never had a play where every single night people gasp at characters'
Was that
action.
something you were expecting? Or did it?
No.
No? Okay.
No, I don't see Peter as a villain. I don't.
Yeah, I don't
Right.
either.
I agree.
No.
Yeah.
But do you think millennials see him as a villain?
I think that there's a part of the sea change in the past like 10 or 15 years is that people have become very Manichaean in terms of how they see everything. So it's all kind of like, there's something very Calvinist about our culture right now. And we're looking for where to point fingers and who to impugn and who's right and who's wrong. And this play troubles those categories, which I think is healthy. But I think people struggle with that when they're watching. Some people struggle with it.
Also the concept of bullying has become very centered in the culture. Suddenly, someone who does that, those are people who get erased. They get canceled in this culture. So it has a different connotation. Driven people are not welcome.
Yeah.
Particularly. But I thought. And I agree with you, though. I think one of the wonderful things, again, I sort of luxuriate in the world you gave us, David. But one of the things is that the capacity these characters have to go through metamorphoses on their own, to within the world in which they're all sharing, they are all still capable of becoming, better versions of themselves, perhaps even in some cases. I mean, Grover's growth. He has that wonderful, the idea of what happens to him and how nuanced, how subtly we come to realize who he is. I don't want to give too much away about the play. It's actually hard to have spoilers in this play. It's really not a case. But even Will Brill's character, there is redemption that happens, and it seems driven. It comes from within. It's not forced on these characters by circumstance. It really seems to evolve the way, people surprise you over time, what happens to them in their own. And I think you found something very real, very authentic about how we all, in this idea that people, never change, they actually do.
Yes. But I think it's like a spiral. So
that's a better word.
Like for Will's character, I think there's going to be another turn of the spiral after this play is over, because Will has jacked up with somebody who is probably a very hardcore opportunist and is going to create havoc for him. And I think also he's someone who, I said this to Will, like, I think Reg, the character he plays, probably, saw some guy on a street corner in Sausalito giving away Carlos Castaneda flyers and thought, ooh, this is great. I might have an epiphany, and then he sort of is like a little bit ahead he wants to be where he's not quite yet there. So it's kind of like, it's more ambiguous than just he has grown. He has
Mhm.
grown.
Well,
And I also think he wishes to grow even more. And I think
Yeah.
he's sort of envisioning where he could be, but he's not quite there yet.
Well, yeah, he's sort of, it's almost like a lateral growth. He goes from being, a druggie to being a complete proselytizer for, a vegan lifestyle. I mean, he needs something to be obsessed with.
Yes.
But I think those things are manifested in the play in ways, in other people's hands, and sometimes it can be so ham-handed. The things that you handle so gently, so delicately, and it that has absolutely a different effect on an audience. How they understand it and how they accept it in a character. That's what I imagined you were doing for 5 years and trying to write these characters.
Yeah, God knows. I mean, so when you're saying that, I was like, wow, did I do that? I don't totally know what I was doing. Like, I think for me, and it was the same thing when I wrote my book, like, I was just trying to do still lives of the characters.
Right.
I was trying to just draw them exactly as I saw them without judging them. So I would let them do things and I would let them stray or sin, but I just noted it. I don't judge. I really love the characters, and I think you can probably feel it. I mean, it's a very deep, profound love that I have for the characters. So when you love them, you can hold them as the writer, and they can do anything, and you're still going to love them. There's something about that kind of love from the artist's perspective that I think it yields better writing somehow. Because it has to be nuanced, because everything they do is going to be shaded through your optic.
I want to go back quickly to something that Peter Marks, not Peter from the play, said about people being canceled, and I really don't have any problem with bullies being canceled, honestly, but I think one of the things that I really love in the play is that there is this idea of that, do you need a leader to get something done? And how far can this leader go? Like, because when the band starts at the beginning of the play, it seems very equal. And then as it goes along, Peter emerges as a kind of de facto leader, or maybe he proclaims himself the leader and the others let him do it. Because there's something also satisfying in having someone do that work for you. There's something often very soothing in saying, oh, okay, so do you want me to do this? Okay, or what should we do? And then he kind of takes that on. So he's the guitarist and he kind of becomes the producer, which I don't think he is at the beginning, but he kind of emerges as that. And what's interesting to me is the way the play looks at how there's a certain passive aggressiveness. Is it aggressiveness, aggressivity, aggression into the other members, where they resent him being the leader, but there's also something comfortable to them. And I think right now a lot of people don't want to deal with that. There's something comfortable in being led. By the way, I really think that's what so many people are into the Trump cult. I think they love that kind of macho, kind of mental thing of being told what to do. And this is obviously not the case, but in a way, the mental mechanism is similar, and how it works in a creative thing, where now there's this idea that we're all equal and we cannot have any conflict. Conflict is uncomfortable. Words are harmful and all that. But in the play, it's like, no, it's tough and it's complicated, and some people are total jerks, to use a mild word. But then art happens. So how do you deal with that? Is it worth it?
Yeah, and I think, to your point, that Peter is also, he really is making the album better. He actually adds value to it. He does have good instincts. He does have good ideas. It was very important that I dramatized in the play how he actually makes stuff better, even though he's driving people crazy. but I think that he doesn't really understand boundaries, and he has no bedside manner. I think that is maybe his biggest failing. He just has no bedside manner. And I think sometimes if you can massage things and you can manipulate people into thinking, you're like their concierge when actually you're dominating them, which Peter would never do because Peter's not a liar. He isn't going to manipulate them. He's blunt. And I think that is in some ways a big crime.
David, I'm thinking as you're talking about the arc of your own career, and I remember first seeing Stunning years ago. I think it was at Woolly Mammoth.
That was a long
in the
time
early
ago.
2000s, and then I saw 3C. I think at Rattlestick and Marie Antoinette. There, you play with form. You don't have a. It's not like it feels like you don't like to do the thing you just did. The fact that you're doing a trilogy of music plays, and yet it sounds like each one of those is different. It seems like you kind of get restless with a style, and or not restless is the right word. Maybe you just want to keep changing up, because I don't know that people would say that's an Adjmi play. You know what I mean? They would know by having seen you and recognize your name, but they feel very distinct as opposed to connected. But I wonder if you experience it that way.
I definitely get restless and bored. I don't like to do the same thing twice. And, I don't, it's deliberate because I want to try things that I haven't tried, and I want to learn things that I don't know how to do. So I never really tried to write 3-dimensional characters before. I didn't want to write that. I was trying to go for something that was more almost cubistic in my other work. And I felt that like I had pushed that so far, I couldn't go any further with it. And so I just thought, I also felt like at a certain point, I don't feel like people know who I am. Like, I don't feel like people understand me. I think that people who watch these plays think I'm a psycho. I remember I did a reading of 3C, an early reading with Catherine Grody, as she played Mrs. Wicker.
Oh my God.
And she was like, and after we did the reading, she said, "Oh my God, I'm so happy to meet you. I thought when I read this play that you were like schizophrenic or something."
That's great.
She was so hilarious. But I thought, yeah, well, you would think that. You would think
that's very funny.
But I was very influenced by like Wallace Shawn and how Wally would present like these weird counter, or like he would show the negative image of himself in these plays. He would show the arguments that he never wants to make, and he would make it. And there was something about that really influenced me early on. But then I thought, I am hostile. I am almost like Artodian in a certain way, and like how I am with my audience. But it's not really my personality. I'm a very warm person, actually. Like the people who know me, I do have this other part to me where, I can be incendiary. But then really, I'm actually a warm person, and I wanted to sort of show people who I am, kind of. And I think that this play feels like me. It has my heart in it.
Interesting.
You're very willing to go into people's kind of worst instincts sometimes. Your plays are very really brutal but like psychologically brutal. I think Stunning has quite a bit of brutality in it. 3C is my favorite play of you until this one. Is also incredibly. It's so brutal. It is really. I think I saw it 3 times, and every time I was just completely stunned by how you just put your finger on the wound and you kind of press. And I find it. I can't think of any other playwrights of your cohort, I would say, that kind of get there. And when I read your memoir, I felt that. And also a conversation we had around that memoir was when you bring up Fassbinder. And I felt, well, that to me is the unlocking to your, not that you're, writing like him, but there is the same willingness to just get in there in those kind of mind games that people play. And Fassbinder, for me, like, and you just mentioned Wallace Shawn, which I had not thought about, but of course now it feels completely obvious. But this willingness to really just get in there and dig. And Fassbinder also because of the kind of often over-the-top extroverted style that he could do it, which was the case with Marie Antoinette and 3C, for instance. Like, is that an influence? Like, is that something that you've thought about in terms of the Fassbinder kind of...
Oh, 100%. I don't know that if I'm influenced by him, but when I saw his films, I watched them all back to back, like all of them,
Whoa.
very quickly. And they're all it's very heterogeneous
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
in terms of style. You know, The Merchant in Four Seasons and Veronica Voss, they're like,
oh, yeah.
you know, opposites in stylistically, but not in terms of the core dynamics. But I think I just saw like someone spiritually, like I felt like I twinned him.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's something there that feels like it lives in me already. And so, yeah, I definitely I always feel more connected to these European artists more so than the American, a lot of American writers that whom I also love. But I feel like I feel like more drawn to these other European artists sometimes.
It feels like a very European. I mean, when you were coming of age, you were talking about, like in the book, about like going to see all these films, and it feels like very much like an American generation that just kind of grew up on this European art cinema. But then you kind of brought it into the theater.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm curious, David. You know, the reception, and I don't mean the reviews, but the reception to this play has been, you know, really galvanizing. There has been, you know, it's kind of it's the thing that people say, you know, have you seen Stereophonic? It's just that happens rarely these days, I think, or too rarely, but it's happened to you. How are you experiencing the moment? Does it feel like a moment? Is that too gets too close to the skin on, you know, like, and makes you like more nervous than happy? I mean, how do you receive all this?
I definitely feel something. I know it's happening because of the volume and the intensity of the responses, like personal responses. You know, like I was just summoned to meet with Patti LuPone. That never happened.
Oh my God! Please say more. You were what? You got to tell us about that.
From Playwrights Rising saying Patti LuPone really wants to talk to you. She saw the play. She really wants to. That's never happened to me before. So, and it's other stuff like that I'm not going to get into right now because it'd be vulgar. But
sure.
But it feels okay. You know what I mean? I think anything, if you feel it too much, just feels bad. So like praise starts to feel bad if you feel it too much.
Sure.
You become dislocated if you feel it too much, or you let yourself try to feel it because you don't know how to. It doesn't mean anything really to me. It means something more for you. But, you know, I'm just working on, I have a new play that I'm doing, and I'm just like working on that. I'm going into workshop tomorrow. So I feel like it was good for me to just schedule that so I could channel my energies into something else. But of course I'm thrilled. You know, I've been at this a long time, and it's so rewarding to feel like I can connect to people and that they receive it. Even if sometimes they receive it in ways where I'm like, really? That's what you got? Sometimes it's really funny. People love it, but they don't quite get it. So, but it doesn't matter. It's sort of like they still embrace the experience. That's very nice.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Well, we're thrilled for you. I think we should let you go and get back to writing, David.
Or to Patti LuPone.
It's what you do so well.
Whichever comes first.
Well, I wasn't going to say anything about the Patti LuPone Peter possibility connection, but because Peter would definitely shut people up in the audience. There's no doubt about it. But anyway, we really appreciate you, and we're thrilled for you, and mostly for bringing us this play. So thank you.
Thank you for being so nice, and thank you for having me. It was so much fun.
Okay, so I realized we said that after every interview, but this was great. I really feel like we're building like an oral history of contemporary theater, because at this point, we're starting to like listeners who want to like hear what pretty much. I mean, we've talked to everybody at this point. Not everybody. There's definitely some big ones that I want to get still, but.
Yeah. No, we've done well. What we've done is we have tried to look. We've searched far and wide. We've tried to find people in all walks of theater life and bring them to you. And I think that maybe you and I, like the podcast itself, are getting better at it.
Yeah, I think so, and I'm glad to say that we're going to continue doing that. So we'll cast a wide net. Okay, so let's sign off for this one, and there will be more. There will be more. Thanks as always for listening. I'm Elizabeth Vincentelli,
and I'm Peter Marks. You can find us on marksvincentelli.substack.com. And to guarantee that there are more of our podcasts coming, please subscribe.
Yes. And you can also let us know what you think. I'm on Twitter, X, at evincentelli, on Threads, Double Diamond EV. But you can just look for my real name. I use my real name. And so do you. You're on Threads
I do.
At Peter J. Marks. We'll talk to you again soon.